Smile, though your heart is aching. Smile, even though it's breaking. When there are clouds in the sky, you'll get by.
Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Grief Chat, and we're very happy because it is the month of February, and we are talking live today with our host of Grief Chat, Mr. Mitch Carmody. Nice to see you.
Oh, good to see you again, Mo.
How have you been?
I've been wonderful, been busy, and I'm excited about some of the guests we have on today. I know the previous hour we had Ann Castaldo, who lost her son, and who also has two surviving sons, and has changed kind of the world with following her loss. And so I'm excited that Glen and Tanya Lord are on the line, who both have also lost a son to medical error and have two surviving children. And I think their son Noah died in 1999, and what they've done since 1999 is phenomenal, and that's why I want them on the show today.
Well, and we want to say welcome to you both, that you are on Grief Chat. Hello to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So as Mitch introduced you, you have an organization called the Grief Toolbox. Who would like to tell us about that, please?
I can talk a little bit about the Grief Toolbox. The Grief Toolbox is an organization that is there to kind of try to be a singular place for all grief resources, whether it be artwork, articles, poems, grief support groups, support materials, whatever people may find helpful in their grief journey. And it was really born out of a desire to make it easier for people to find grief resources. After our son died in 1999, the world was a very different place at that point in time, and the internet was still in its infancy, and you'd go to the real bookstores to get books. You wouldn't necessarily buy them online, and there really wasn't very much out there. And so we kind of put it all together to find a centralized location to allow people to find the tools that would help them in their grief journey.
Well, tell us about your son, please.
Well, all right. Noah is our son. Noah was born in 1995. He was a wonderful, happy, very intelligent young man. He had his tonsils out, and that was what ultimately led through a variety of different medical errors to his death in 1999 at 4.5. And now Tanya actually focuses on that support of the medical error, and changing that system is really where her focus is. But Noah is he was a wonderful young man who had very happy and go lucky and very curious and interested in the world.
Mm.
In fact, Tanya, didn't she acquire her PhD following Noah's death?
Yes, I think that was, I went back to school. I was a special ed teacher, and stay-at-home mom when Noah was born. And after his death, he at the time was our only child. This huge gap in my life. And being the daughter of academics, and having spent most of my life on college campuses, I think I first sought out school as a refuge to grief. It was a place where I could focus on something different. But one of the things that had struck me very early on was, I think it was actually the first shower that I took after Noah died, which was embarrassingly 3 or 4 days later. And I remember just feeling an overwhelming sense of loss, not just of Noah, but of the fact that I didn't feel like the world was going to remember him. And that at 4 years old, Glen and I were his primary caregivers, and there didn't seem like he would have a lot of legacy, a lot of people who would remember him. And I can't, make a nice story if right then and there I understood what my path was going to be. But I knew that it was going to be something. And so when I was in school first for a master's in public health and then a PhD, focusing on patient safety and preventing medical errors, that has turned out really to be a way to honor him his life and his death, and also my experience of being part of or witnessing the error and then witnessing his death in the work that I do.
And hopefully to reduce the amount of deaths by medical error, that you're affecting that community as well and going out into the hospitals. And beside the bereavement community, are you going to hospitals and
Right. So I work in New Hampshire with all of the New Hampshire hospitals in really a patient-family engagement. So it's bringing that patient voice into the improvement efforts so that there's a greater partnership with patients when they're in the hospital and their families when they're in the hospital, but also at the organizational level of the hospital. So I help hospitals set up patient-family advisory councils. And then I work at a national level with the American Hospital Association and other organizations, speaking and doing workshops, et cetera, very much in the same line with the hope of reducing medical errors and mostly and bringing awareness to it so that both patients and families can have a hand in making things safer, as well as the healthcare workers as well.
So look, I know you both have done so much since 1999, and you have two surviving boys as well, right? Ivan and Vladik, and how did that affect what you were doing, where you're going back to school, and Glenn was working on the Grief Toolbox, and yet you're still raising two small children?
Well, I think
Go ahead.
That was actually a somewhat of a struggle early on when they came after, when they were adopted when they were 4 and 6. And when they came home, whereas I had been a stay-at-home mom with Noah, I didn't feel the same ability to do that as much as I wanted to raise and be home with our kids. I had a very base fear of that being taken away from me again. It was really, that was a huge part of Noah's death, was that I just didn't even know what to do every day. If you can think of a 4-year-old, you're pretty involved in their life. Mm-hmm. And that was my entire life. Not entire, but that was a big part of my life. And so with the kids, Glenn had changed his job to be more present at home, and so I did school initially in the evenings, and then my PhD program took a big chunk of it, but we just shared parenting responsibilities in a different way.
And Glenn, you are now the president of the Compassionate Friends. You put a lot of energy into the Compassionate Friends early on, correct?
Absolutely. For those of your listeners who may not be aware, I imagine you talk about them a lot, but the Compassionate Friends is the world's largest self-help organization for bereaved parents, siblings, and grandparents. And there are over 700 locations throughout the United States and actually in about 52 countries around the world. So it is really a very proliferal, very, very much everywhere around the country. And it is an excellent. It's a place that I found hope myself early on in my grief. I was so lost. I had no idea, how to just keep going, how to relate, how to even have people who could hear the depths of my pain and not turn from it. And in the Compassionate Friends meetings, I found that I was not alone, that there were others who shared my grief and were able to relate to my grief. And, their grief journeys in some ways was similar, in other ways it wasn't. But what was important is that we all loved and cared about each other, and we all wanted to provide a safe environment for people to feel and do whatever they felt and do. And at present, I'm the president of the board of directors of the Compassionate Friends, and we're, all around the country. I think we actually have some locations near you guys, if I'm not wrong, Mitch.
Oh, yes, we have a lot in the Twin Cities. And That is a very demanding job, and I know you but you do so much, and I've seen, I think, almost what the Compassionate Friends did before, and now with the Grief Toolbox, you're modeling that same kind of global mentality to help people globally.
Well, I think that if you kind of, you talk about the purpose of today's, focus of today's show is, finding that hope again and finding your purpose again. And I think one of the things that I'm trying to do with both my involvement at the Grief Toolbox and my involvement with the Compassionate Friends is trying to change our entire culture. Because I think that as a society, we're just beginning to really open up the door to allow people to grieve. I mean, I am amazed to see all of the primetime television shows that are beginning to honestly and openly recognize and talk about grief, and to see how some of the young people in today's society are very different than our generation in terms of being willing to be open and share it. And I think if we can keep doing that, death and grief is a normal part of everybody's life. We're all going to experience it at some point in our lives, and the more we can normalize that and have people not be afraid of it and recognizing that it's just an aspect of life like many other aspects of life, I think the more it'll be available for people to find that hope. And because I don't think the key is making it go away. I think the key is recognizing that it is part of who you are, like many other events in life, and incorporating it into to who you are. And so the goal of many of those, of what I do, is to try to change that and normalize it on a more global scale.
Yep. I think you're right with the whole normalizing of it and making it not only that, but it's do you agree? I'm seeing more of a pride in survivorship. That there's a pride. There's a whole groups of people. You can feel this group pride that have survived, and people kind of look at those people and say, I want what they're having. How are they doing it? And that's what I think the Grief Toolbox is so important, and getting that message out there.
I would agree. I think we're moving from a society that pities and hides from the grief to a recognition that there's a strength in the pain, that feeling these strong emotions is not weakness. It's actually it is a strength. And I think, as you say, there's a pride in that, and a pride in that survivorship, and a pride in that ability to incorporate that and not have it destroy you or just have it be something that you hide.
Yep. I think it takes the courage to be vulnerable. I think that's an important part of the bereavement process, is allowing that vulnerability to allow us to be more resilient in our recovery and healing.
Right, absolutely. I would agree with that. And that's, as you point out, that's one of the goals of the globalness of the Grief Toolbox, and then the whole Walking Through Grief series, which you were a part of kind of to provide people a resource to even offer that as a working model in a grief group to help people find their own way throughout that journey.
I'm on your website, actually, thegrieftoolbox.com, and it really is just a fabulous tool for somebody that would take the time to read some of these beautiful, there's postings. I see there's some blog entries. Are they from different people around the country?
There are almost 1,000 contributors that we have in different forms, and we're always looking for new contributors. I mean, the reality of the grief journey is that no two journeys are alike, but if we can take little bits and pieces from other people's journeys, we can see that I may not completely relate to this person or that person, but I can see aspects of my journey in all of them. So, yeah, there are many, many different contributors.
Yeah, it's very lovely and very beautiful.
It's a huge wheelhouse.
Oh, my gosh, yes, very much so. And if you had something like this, how would this have changed your grieving process, do you think?
It would have helped me to find, I think, that the Compassionate Friends was a lifeline for me, and it was a place where I could speak and find that hope. But for me, I also am a kind of an introverted individual when it comes to my pain and suffering, and to have a resource where I could kind of self-study and analyze and think and go through would have helped me, I think, incorporate Noah into my life. I mean, Noah is and will always be a part of my life. and recognizing how that happens and what that is, for me, took a very, very long time. And there is no timeline on that, and there is no rush to do it, but I think it would have helped me in that process.
You know, I agree with you. I think a lot of people, grieving or not, are not necessarily group or meeting people. And so this is a beautiful place where people can go and do a lot of reading and perhaps help themselves in that regard. And DVDs, I see there's also many links to other places. It's called thegrieftoolbox.com. We have about a minute and a half left.
Okay, yeah, Glenn, well, you have a minute and a half left. I'd like to know both what you and Tanya, what a closing remark that you'd like to say to those who are newly bereaved, or even to those who have been bereaved for a long time and are still finding that lack of joy in their life. And, you know, what tips could you give them?
I'll go first and just say something really quickly. And the biggest thing I think that I would say is so often in grief people talk about don't letting others should on us. And I don't really think that's our problem in grief. I think we're pretty strong about not having others should on us. But I guess what I would ask everyone to look at is don't should on yourselves. Be open to the fact that you may change some of your belief structures. You may change some of your rules. And there's nothing wrong with keeping them. But, you know, evaluate them. Don't just keep them just because they are.
Bingo. You hit it on evaluate. I think that's a brilliant advice.
That is beautiful advice. We want to thank our guests today, Glen and Tanya Lord, and their organization in honor of their son Noah is thegrieftoolbox.com. And thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you.
Really nice
Thank
to
you,
meet
guys.
both of you. And thank you, Mitch, host of Grief Chat, heard monthly on AM 1460 KDWA. Thanks for all you do, Mitch.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Mo. And thank you, Glenn and Tanya. And thank you, Ann Castaldo and Tony and Noah. And that we're reaching out to helping so many people. And it's people like you that make it possible. Thank you.
And you are listening to Grief Chat on AM 1460 KDWA in Hastings.
Smile, though your heart is aching. Smile, even though it's breaking. When there are clouds in the sky, you'll get by.